I grew up in a row house, and by looking out the back door or looking out across the street, where you could see just sort of massively different socioeconomic circumstances as you sort of go towards the proverbial railroad tracks. Always had to get ready to get your dukes up. You go across the tracks.
What's good? I'm Nikisha Elise Williams, and this is Black and Published, bringing you the journeys of writers, poets, playwrights, and storytellers of all kinds. Today's guest is Lawrence Jackson, author of the book Shelter, A Black Tale of Homeland, Baltimore. As a Be More native, Lawrence maps his beginnings from a row house in a predominantly Black working-class neighborhood to owning a piece of the American dream, where he raises his two sons in a city ripped apart by the wages of racism and violence.
I'm living here in Baltimore. I'm raising these guys, and we've got a mortality here, or a possibility of mortality that is outrageous by any global standard, right? Let alone the standard of a country with the highest standard of living, or one of the highest standards of living, right? We've got a standard of dying here.
In Shelter, Lawrence uses a historical lens to compare his present with the past and excavate faith, fatherhood, and home ownership. As an English professor and biographer, he explains the importance of acknowledging from whence you came as you grow, how he used writing to work out his rage, and why he thinks the fire next time is overrated. That and more when Black and Published continues. You ready? All right, Lawrence. So my first question for you today is, when did you know that you were a writer?
I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I started to keep a diary in high school, and mainly boy-girl stuff, struggles with the parents, and attempting to develop my own identity. But I certainly could see the value of writing as a place of solitude and self-reflection that was really valuable. When I was in college, a very good friend of mine was murdered. He was a student at Morehouse. I was a student at Wesleyan University. And it was, incredibly traumatic for me personally, for his family, for all of our families. I mean, we came from a community. But what I couldn't get over was the way that these narratives about young Black men were so powerful that they seemed to stand in the way of achieving justice, or even pursuing justice, in fact. It was through writing that, especially the writer Ralph Ellison, reading writers and then doing my own writing, that I was able to sort of find a place to make a stand, I guess, so that you wouldn't be just sort of walking around enraged all of the time at the contradiction of your existence and experience, and so that you could begin to generate some solutions, first at the individual level, and then maybe moving out into broader interventions.
So do you think it was the murder of your friend that then led you to try to find a place for your rage that then led to your writing?
I would say it was a number of experiences. Again, some of them very sad. Around the same time, I lost my father, and again, the personal injury or the personal wound is sort of one thing, but then also like losing the history that he represented. My father passed away before I had enough consciousness about, let's say, Black history. And we talked about Black history, but in a global sense. But to ask him about, our own family history in some ways. My father's father was born in slavery. But that's something that we never talked about. And my dad was of the generation of people who were just sort of beginning to understand that that was not something that was shameful. That was something that should have been a place of encouragement and a place of really pride that we were descendants of people who survived enslavement. But I would say, that and trying to figure out what I would do for a career. I knew that I didn't want to be an attorney. I worked at the state's attorney's office in Baltimore, and thinking about how the history and literature of Black people could be kind of a liberatory or an emancipationist tool.
So then how did your writing voice take shape? You talk about understanding Black history, personal tragedies, finding your place and your function of rage on the page. So how did that all take shape for you to begin your writing career and begin to write your books?
It began with a series of these elegies to my hometown, that is featured on like these television programs that I'm thinking specifically of something like The Wire, which certainly capture a portion of, what's taking place here in Baltimore. But for the most part, they're not written by African Americans. And I wanted to record um, the beauty and the struggle of people whose lives were lost. So my friend Donald Bentley, and then another good friend of mine, Chris Shelton, who both passed away tragically. And these notes about the ceremonies of their passing, the ceremonies and rituals of our upbringing, were at the center of what I tried to do as a writer. So I wrote one piece really for Donald called Slickheads, and that one's in Black vernacular, or my attempt or approach to Black vernacular from Baltimore, beyond what I saw as certain stereotypes about Black speech or Black vernacular. And then the other piece, like for Chris, which is called Christmas in Baltimore, which is really just about a homegoing ceremony, about his funeral. And then he's resting at a cemetery that we used to go to after big dances. We would make our own after party, sort of in these secluded places in the suburban parts, and talk about his homegoing there. But again, just efforts to commemorate or re-inhabit the lives of people who were being, I felt, unfairly pushed into stereotypes.
So in writing those elegies for your two friends and, you know, excavating what their lived humanity meant in contrast to the stereotypes that abounded about Black people and Black people in Baltimore specifically, was that where the first inklings of shelter started?
Shelter is another kind of project. I mean, I think like a lot of African American writers, you're always sort of in search of an audience. There's certainly a public conversation that things are quite different at this point than they were 20 years ago, and it may be true. And I certainly would hope to see more people discover their voices and write their books and feel good about the work that they're doing. But I would say, like with the book Shelter, which is really 7 essays um, dealing with the topic of home ownership, fatherhood, um, and I would say faith more so than organized religion, though it is very specifically about organized religion in a certain way. And then also, sort of folded in parts of African American history and American national history, but especially the way that American national history is always fully embedded in enslavement of people of African descent. So in that way, I would say that this is a work that I hope would participate in a maybe even a broader conversation about what the ambitions are for Black people moving from one class to another class, and really what they used to say in The Catcher in the Rye, the ring, what the fulfillment really is, Is it the dream of homeownership? I mean, I think Brother Ta-Nehisi Coates writes very movingly about the way that dream can be crushed, and the way that every generation, has sort of been stymied in this attempt. And in my own family, I represent the first generation. I make the best investment with the best school, closest to work, the best for your dollar. And so the book is also, sort of like deeply engaged with that problem, because as you can imagine, you sacrifice a great deal. But the book is definitely, it's like a full-on wrestling match. I was on the wrestling team in high school and college. It's a full-on wrestling match with, the dynamic, the problem, what we would say the predicament in cultural studies or historical studies, the predicament of pursuing your economic interest when they're always cut against so sharply your social and historical interest. And what does that mean to be an American or to be living in America and to constantly be making choices about that? One of my favorite anecdotes about this problem is when I was a teacher in West Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, in 2013 and 2014. And I was leaving the university with a colleague, and I said to him, "Hey man, let's just stop and have a beer." And he just immediately just pulled the car off the road and pulled up beside a cafe, and we got out, and there was some music in the background. We sat down at the table, and we just had a couple of beers, and we watched the crowd go by. And we made the various comments, we people watched, and we were having very light conversation, and we got back in the car and we went to the house. But it was fascinating to me because I said to him, like, to be a Black American and to do the same thing in the United States, you're making all of these sort of calculations that are, it changes the experience totally. I was living in Bouaké in Cote d'Ivoire, where they recently had civil war, and you could see the remnants of the civil war. But nonetheless, I would just, the thing I was trying to convey to my friend was that the feeling is so different. And wouldn't it be great to be able to have, this feeling, again, a certain kind of casual acceptance, bedrock assumptions, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of rightness. And then, there was also the aesthetic component. I mean, there's an inner joy and satisfaction that comes with being able to really sort of enjoy one's own people. It was an interesting contrast that's always stayed with me. And so I'm always sort of looking for that place where you can, without so much work, without so much performance, where you can enjoy Black being, Black culture, Black life.
So then, in noting that contrast from Baltimore to Cote d'Ivoire and distilling that experience down to In Shelter with those 7 essays, was this the first of your non-academic works that you wanted to try to find its audience and put out there?
There's an interesting or another story about the creation of Shelter, which was originally contracted as a collection of previously published essays. And when I was thinking about what I would really like to do or really like to say, that's when sort of the new work came about, or I decided to move in another direction and to link together all of the experiences about sort of homecoming in Baltimore. The book is also trying to address centrally the question, what is the obligation or the responsibility of the person from a community who then has the opportunity to return as a person who has access to resources that the community might have historically had withheld. So that's a real pursuit of the collected essays.
So then, in talking about community and the responsibility to community and the dichotomy of community in Shelter, let's get to the book. So if you could read something from Shelter to kind of ground the audience, and then we'll dive back into the conversation. All right, Black and Published family. Before we get to the reading, a little bit more about Lawrence's book, Shelter. As he mentioned, the book is a collection of 7 essays on home ownership, fatherhood, and faith. But he also wrestles with classism and racism and how that plays out in his own life, going from his roots in a row house into how he's moved on up. All right, here's Lawrence.
This is page 273. Ordinary time, the gentle brushing fescue. When the children were born, I would make up word games that could add an air of mystery and intrigue to our family's distant past. My own parents had done the same with me. My father groomed us with a family name jingle that was popular during the second Eisenhower campaign. Whenever there was enough wet snow in the alley at 58 to take out the old flexible flyer, he would sing the jingle to my sister and me along with the choral music he'd learned in college. Ivor Chevernow and Richard Kuntz's The Sleigh. To my mind, his caroling was an ornament inseparable from the heraldry he had begun to devise for our family, half installation art, half portraiture. He was amused by a twin Mammy salt and pepper shaker made of green plastic that found its way to our kitchen table, then the shelf over the sink, then the rail heading down to the finished basement. He fashioned 2 or 3 poster-sized Nubian paintings of mother and child. A black and white canvas hung atop the mantel of our faux fireplace. One painted on an orange piece of plywood covered the window of the garage. These crests were mysterious to me, but an indelible part of him. His preoccupations were revived when I bought my first house, which I wanted to name in honor of Nanny or Cujo, or call Negro Hill or African Hill, not quite having the required hubris for Jackson Hall or Jackson Moore. Remembering a placard I had seen in St. Augustine, I settled on Seminole Hill, but I couldn't single-handedly infuse the children's memories with the term, and it took more than a little for me to dredge up that name myself. In the same way that African flight to St. Augustine and the etymology of Seminole are brushed over spots of the Southeast's Black story, none of my children today recall baptizing our house. Really, they showed only faint interest in the fantasies of heraldry. It was not at all like the brow of a soft and gentle eminence from the patriarchal romance stories. I console myself by flying from the porch the same Maryland colonial flag I saw at Y Church, the kind of ensign that Matthias de Souza, a Black colonist aboard the Ark in 1633, might have seen billowing in the wind.
Thank you for starting with that section, which brings the story of your home and where you are to a conclusion. So as I was reading the book and diving in, I noticed when you say on page 16, I grew up on a city block with 10 households. Albion Road seems the epitome of pastoral. Why was it so important for you to draw that stark difference between the Baltimore of your youth with the Baltimore of your adulthood, and letting people know that where you are now is far and away different from where you started?
Well, they say that that's the way that we understand anything is through comparison, and ultimately through contrast is what gives us the distinction. And I probably would have made the contrast more sharply, but my mother still lives in the house that I grew up in. I'm sure she would have disapproved of that very heartily. And this is part of I think it's a part of the complexity of, I hope what I have been able to achieve, but certainly what I was after is that, I grew up in a row house. To grow up in my household was to have a certain idea about what it meant to be a middle-class Black person. And then as the world enlarged, I had to put that definition up against many others. Now, again, I didn't know so many other Black people who had much more than we did, but I did know that they were there. But there is no sharper contrast in the city, in Baltimore is an old city in both ways, like old as in ancient and old as in it still preserves the old ways. You could get part of this contrast, like in the house that I grew up in, by looking out the back door or looking out across the street, where you could see, separated by, I don't know, 50 feet, just sort of massively different socioeconomic circumstances. Where we're like on the border block between a solidly middle class in many standalone homes and a what we thought of as an upper working class, but anyway, a working class or upper working class in increasingly regimented, more tightly spaced, fewer ornaments, as you sort of go towards the proverbial railroad tracks. Always had to get ready to get your dukes up. You go across the tracks. And then, of course, Homeland is in Baltimore, still very close to its origins. It's not a plantation per se, but this was the plantation manor of one of the longest serving politicians in the region, and the person who crafted the maps, the language for property rights in the city and in the county for multiple successive generations. So, you can sort of, one expansion neighborhood where you have African-American migrants who are, every generation, 1930, 1950, 1960, 65 is when my parents bought their house, trying to move against the segregation red line and all of the economic disasters that perpetuated segregation, will be following or at the heels or anticipating these Black migrants. And then the contrast is with Homeland, where, you've had, in a sense, sort of the same kind of wealth and privilege preserved now for, 3 centuries.
So then in talking about, you didn't use this word, but it's the word that comes to mind, escaping the socioeconomic status that you were born into for that of a higher class. You have a line that stood out to me that says, a life of humble service was like a sentence. Do you mean that in because at first I was like a prison sentence? Or do you mean that because it's like a sentence in that there is no movement there, similar to a prison sentence, like your growth or development is just stunted? Is that why you believe that, in Black families, Black households specifically, that there's always this, I guess this
Inertia.
Not so much inertia, but, this preaching that, you've got to do better, you've got to be better, you've got to move up, or there will be inertia.
Or you fall, well, I would say, you fall back.
Yeah.
And that's the fatherhood side of this, right? The work has an investment in, what can be passed on to the next generation. And, I have the great fortune of, raising the 2 sons right now. And this thing about, what can I convey to them? I would like to convey a material foundation to them, if that's possible. But mainly, I want to convey a belief system. And of course, the belief system is not so distinguishable in some of the reductionist terms from an upward mobility narrative. And so you have to insist to them that this is not the plateau for you. You want to keep pushing and striving and breaking barriers. But it's as difficult for me as it was for my parents, without a doubt. How do you emphasize the contrast between the experience that they have and an experience that could possibly be more desirable or more fruitful, a greater level of achievement? So that's a condition that all parents face, but it is an especially acute one for the Black parent. The thing, right, that you can never get over or never get past, like everybody keeps trying to repeat the fire next time, the opening essay, James Baldwin, Letter to My Nephew, right? And few people are asking the question, well, what happened to his nephew, or why was he writing to his nephew at 15? And then you think about it a little bit more and you say, well, he probably felt like I needed to intervene because, hey, maybe something's going to happen to James. And then, it's sort of like James falls off the radar, falls off the map. So that's not an acceptable conclusion for me, right? I don't know. I mean, again, I've known families that have gone through, sort of this pain, this pain of losing the generation, and that's the reason why you need faith, right? You got to have faith. But uh, even notwithstanding the possibility, and I'm living here in Baltimore, I'm raising these guys, and we've got a mortality here, or a possibility of mortality that is, it's outrageous by any global standard, right? Let alone the standard of a country with the highest standard of living, or one of the highest standards of living, right? We've got a standard of dying here. But sort of even putting that sort of problem aside, you're looking for new ways to invigorate the desire of the next generation to go forward. And for me, in this one, it's definitely the house and neighborhood.
Yes. Another thing I noticed in Shelter and how you have the essay set up is the use of the liturgical calendar. And you also talk about, the 7 essays being about homeownership, faith, and fatherhood. So, what role has your faith played in your understanding of home as well as in your writing?
Thank you so much for the question. Faith is ritual and ceremony. It's a practice or a practical thing, and it's a way that I keep revitalizing and revisiting familial connections. It's a way for me to get at the length, depth, and breadth of ancestry, and then also to project it forward and to have some optimistic expectations about the future. And of course, you can sort of boil it down to trying to get young people in the car on Sunday morning for church, which also can be sort of just me getting myself in the car on Sunday morning for church. And an obligatory ritual, but I try to show in a couple places the immense, for me, it's just like an immense and incalculable kind of the payoff is it's with great sadness that I say payoff, because I don't want to reduce it to sort of an economic function, bonanza, or payoff, or whatever. But it's just sort of this place of joyful celebration. That I guess if you had a certain kind of perspective or mentality, you're anticipating this every Sunday. I'm also a middle-aged person, so I'm moving from Friday night and Saturday night to Sunday morning as my place of regular joy. Hopefully, it won't move too fast, or hopefully, we still have some opportunities left. Because, in fact, I talk about that. For me, so many transcendental moments out on the dance floor, right? Definitely a place of sacrifice, discipline, and humiliation. Definitely at certain stages, but also one of just sort of amazing, joyful celebration. And the music is spiritual, is rhythmic, but in any way you get the same dimensions, or I receive so many of the same dimensions through religious worship.
I want to move into a speed round and a little game, and then I will let you go for the afternoon. So, what is your favorite book?
Invisible Man comes to mind.
Who is your favorite author?
I would say Chester Himes.
Who is your favorite character on The Wire?
I mean, the person who I'm repeating the most is definitely Marlo. I mean, again, I would watch The Wire like it would just be Marlo and Avon Barksdale. I mean, those would be my favorite. I probably like Avon's single lines the most, but between Avon and Marlo.
You mentioned your time in Cote d'Ivoire and having that feeling of home. So, if money were no option, where would you go? What would you do? And where would you live and why?
Mm. Maybe not one single place, but certainly Grand Bassam and Cote d'Ivoire, they have there everything that most people talk about what they would love to have or to be sort of surrounded by. I would love to be able to spend as much time as I wanted to anywhere on the continent that I could go, because I don't know anything about places like Marrakesh and Fez, or Tunis, or even Cairo and Alexandria, or Meroe. I don't know anything about sort of that part of the world. I feel like I'm a practicing Black Christian, right? I would love to spend some time in Aksum and other parts of Ethiopia. These are the oldest Black places of Christianity on planet Earth, and I mean, we should be taking our cues from the Ethiopians, not from the English and the French. I mean, these are like the late converts. You know what I mean? So I would love to be able to. I would love to be able to live out there. I would like to kind of be able to get to know Congo, Angola, Cameroon, and then I had the great fortune of being able to give some lectures in Ilorin and Kwara State in Nigeria years ago, and visited the holy place at Oshogbo, but Port Harcourt and Calabar. The Igbo region is another destination for me, because the Igbo are the predominant group that went to Virginia, and all my family, both sides of my family, everybody's from Virginia. So I would like to sort of see Igbo places up close.
And name 3 things on your bucket list.
I'm definitely conscious of what you need your health for. So I got 2 main things on the bucket list right now. Are like I need to see these guys finish college. So that would be kind of like 1 and 2. So I'd be pretty thankful for that. And then maybe the third thing would be I want to take a river trip from River Bay trip, but like from Annapolis. We could go from Baltimore, the Patapsco River in Baltimore, to Washington, D.C. on the Potomac. I would like to explore the riverways of the Chesapeake Bay and the Potomac River Basin.
That's different. So, my game for you is called Rewriting the Classics. What's the one book you wish you would have written?
It would be like either like The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, or How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney.
What's one book where you want to change the ending, and how would you do it?
Now these are real stumpers. Something like either have Pilate live at the end of Song of Solomon, or maybe it would be like to have, I don't know, it would be something like either have Pilate live, or to know that Milkman had survived, or something like that. I'm drawn to the mythological, fantastic endings of those 2 books by Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon and Tar Baby.
Yes.
So,
Sorry. I've been wondering about what happens at the end of Tar Baby, like what happened to him since I read the book. So I
he
do
becomes one of the
understand that.
400, right?
Yeah. So I actually talked about this with Robert Jones Jr. at the end of his book, The Prophets, and you don't actually know what happens to Isaiah. And then I was like, you know what? Toni Morrison taught me to stop wondering what happens. So I have to stop wondering what happens to Isaiah. Still not over it, Robert. All right. My last question for Rewriting the Classics is, name a book that you think is overrated or overtaught, and why?
That's a tough question too, but I might say, for our own moment, I might say actually Fire Next Time, which I was teaching yesterday, and think is it's a magnificent work. But I think that you shouldn't expect one text to carry so much weight between roughly the mid 30s through the mid 70s.
Got it. And so my final question for you today is, once you are dead and gone and among the ancestors, what would you like someone to write about the legacy of words and the body of work that you've left behind?
Could say the same thing, the James Baldwin saying, a good man and an honest writer. There's nothing wrong with that. That's very reputable. I'm constantly giving these, talking about these epitaphs with my children constantly. It's a great pastime of ours. I keep the spirituals in my wallet that I want to have in my funeral service. And, but one of them is lead me. So it could be that, lead me, guide me along the way. Lord, if you lead me, I will not stray. Lord, let me walk each day with thee. Lead me, oh Lord, lead me.
Lead me. Thank you, Lawrence.
It was a lot of fun. You're a great person. Thanks so much for inviting me on your show.
Big thank you to Lawrence Jackson for being here today on Black and Published. Make sure you check out Lawrence's latest book, Shelter, A Black Tale of Homeland, Baltimore. It's out right now, today, from Grey Wolf Press. That's our show for the week. If you like this episode and want more Black and Published, head to our Instagram page. It's at Black and Published, and that's BLK and Published. There, I've posted a bonus clip from my interview with Lawrence about how Baltimore was formed and informed by slavery, and how famous Baltimoreans now are finally changing the narrative about the city. Make sure you check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. Next week, our guest will be Lola Akinmade Akestrom, author of the novel In Every Mirror She's Black. I'll holler at y'all next week. Peace.